Awesome, welcome back. Our next speaker today is Salomé Mortazavi. Salomé leads the DesignOps team at SiriusXM. Prior to her journey into DesignOps, Salomé spent many years as a design leader and consultant, helping Fortune 500 companies transform their software development practices through lean, agile, and user-centered methodologies. In this talk, she will give an overview of how she leverages the Design Maturity Index to hyper-focus DesignOps efforts to scale the design team's impact on business. Please welcome Salomé.
Thank you, Francis. Thank you, everyone, for joining this talk. Let me start with the logistics and share my screen, and we can get started. All right, Francis, are we good? Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So welcome, everyone. I'm really excited to be sharing this space with you. Thank you all for joining from all different parts of the world. Today, I'm going to be talking, as Francis said, about practices and really maximizing your efforts as a design ops team. So some of the takeaways today are going to be example that I'm going to share from in the field, something that I've done before. And I'm going to be leveraging a lot of frameworks that you know. And luckily for us, there'll be lots of resources. And so we can really use those. And I hope that my internet is friendly and stays with me today. And that's it. Let's get started. I wanted to, before we jump in, talk a little bit about myself. I'll take 60 seconds, just tell you a little bit about who I am and who you're listening to so we can be friends. First of all, I'm Canadian. I live in Seattle. I moved here 6 years ago. English is my second language. I love to meditate. I think everything comes down to how you see the world, and finding that space within is super important. I have an amazing partner in life. And that's not the horse, his picture is not here. We love to travel. I love animals, as you can see. And to the right top hand, you see Tank, that's my dog. So if you hear him, he's just saying hello. I started my journey as a graphic designer, and then I made my way into UX. And so I love that. And I love bringing those practices into design ops. You can see below Andrew Huberman, not David Sinclair, Andrew Huberman. I'm obsessed with the Huberman podcast. If you don't know it, you should check it out. So many hacks onto how to live a better life. We are in spring. Spring is my favorite time of the year. I love blossoms of any kind. So you can see me in the streets, just staring at trees, looking like a weirdo. And last but not least, I love music. I love music, and that makes it really, really good for me because I work at SiriusXM Pandora. We have a really cool team of designers and design operators. And we're also hiring, so shameless plug. If you're interested in joining our team, send me a note, hit me up on LinkedIn, and I can get you in here. All right, so, as we dive in, I wanted to start with this slide. This is actually a swag. A good friend of mine, Meredith Black, who created an amazing design ops community, gave me. And I just love this because I find it to be so true. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this too. As design operators, we're often spending so much time with our teams, understanding their feelings and their emotions and their needs. And to be honest, this is really the biggest joy of my life. Everything in my life, when I was a designer and now I'm a design ops practitioner and leader, is all about people. Everything comes down to people, spending time with those people, understanding their needs, knowing what makes them tick, and, ultimately really wanting to help everyone, which, adds a lot of meaning to my life. But, at the same time, on the flip side, this can mean that a lot of things are coming at you. You end up saying yes a lot because you want to make everyone happy and you want to solve problems for everyone. And, sometimes it can feel like you're treading water, and the more order that you create for others, the more disorder comes to your life. And, it can feel like you're constantly, just playing whack-a-mole and, not really being strategic. And so I've, had to learn this the hard way. I've really struggled with saying yes and taking too much on. And so I've shared this with you and shared this problem that most of us share with you all. And so I'm going to be sharing a lot of different practices that I found really helpful that are going to help us be able to find that focus and find that value. So that's what we're really here to talk about today. So at the core of everything that we do, regardless of what your background is, and I hope I have some peeps in design ops in the audience and designers, regardless of what you do, everything comes down to being value driven and delivering value and delivering business impact. So whether you're a maker or a leader or manager, that means you have to really focus on that. And, lucky for us, there are a ton of different frameworks out there that we can lend from and borrow from. And so there's a huge community of amazing, talented people, of design ops practitioners, designers, product managers. You can just look out there and find so many different frameworks that you can make yours or tweak to fit your context or create some new ones and share it with the community. So in the spirit of not trying to reinvent the wheel, that's what I'm going to be sharing a lot with you today. Some of those frameworks that I've tweaked and helped to really make sense of the world that I'm in. So starting with that value, at the end of the day, everything in business value manifests itself in two ways. Either your employees are reducing the effort and reducing the cost for that business or increasing that revenue. And I love how one of my favorite design ops leaders, Patricia, talks about this. If you don't know Patricia, please check her out. She really simplified this framework and brought it down to two things, either increasing the operational efficacy or efficiency. And so everything comes down to that. And if you can really frame it that way, it becomes so much more simplified. And so that I love to look at everything through this lens. But still, even through looking through this lens, there's going to be an endless sea of things to do. There's so many things to do in both categories. And so what are some of the ways that you can, find that focus? And, I'm sure a lot of you, according to the State of Design Ops report by Angelos, you can see that 70% of our teams out there are a team of one. I used to be a team of one. I struggled with finding this focus. And so it comes so much down to being able to know where to start. As you all know, and I'm sure you all have done this in your role, I'm a big fan of listening tours. When I first joined my job, I continuously listen. So making time for that proper listening tour is really, really important. Sure, surveys are great, but there's so much rich context that can be missed. So as you join your job within the first 2 weeks or within your first 90 days, make time to really understand the space, spend time understanding the bigger picture and understanding the baseline of the practices and getting notes to the people. And that can really help to expose some foundational systemic problems. And it will also help you to really build trust with your leadership, with all of the different disciplines that are creating an ecosystem for design to thrive in. So really understanding those key players. And, if you didn't do this, that's totally fine. You can do it anytime. You can fit it into your regular one-on-ones with your design team. And if you don't do your one-on-ones, I suggest start doing that today, because it's such a good way to keep a pulse on what's happening with the team and continuously learn from them, because everything is always changing, and that includes your team and your team's needs. So we would spend the first 2 weeks and doing this and really getting all that data. And then you got to make sense of it. So what are you going to do with all that data that's coming at you? There's so much, and you might not know what to do with it. And you have to make it really palatable for your leadership team and really be strategic in the things that you're surfacing. And so one of my favorite frameworks to use is a design maturity index. So there are so many ways that to map this. There are many different design maturity models out there, like Nielsen Norman or McKinsey. My favorite one is from Leah Bewley. She created the New Design Frontier. It's an amazing report. It's the largest report of its kind, 2,200 different companies across different industries. And so if you don't know the New Design Frontier, I recommend going and downloading it. I'll also link it from the resources section. And it's really mapping all of the design impact to business, which is, the value that we're talking about. And that's really, really helpful to frame your questions and also calibrate your synthesis and the answers back through. So that's what I like to use. And this is a closer look at the report. So you can see at its core, there are the 9 dimensions of maturity that literally every design team shares. And you can see a direct correlation between business impact and the design maturity. And that's really good news for your design leaders because, as you know, the industry is constantly trying to really show the value of design. And now we're trying to show the value of DesignOps. And what better way to do that than to really help your leadership show the value of design. And so framing your questions and your findings this way is really helpful in ultimately finding the most impactful, valuable things to tackle. And, as I said, like before, there's a quick tip. You can also look at the back of this report, and there's criteria for each of those dimensions, which are really helpful to craft your questions in this way. So, you can start your questions really wide to be able to understand the breadth of all of the things happening with your design team and your product and engineering team, but then narrow your scope and be able to hit each of those dimensions. This is not how the report is supposed to be used because I've done the full-fledged surveys with teams. It's really extensive, but this is how I've made it work for me. And I think that's how you could try and see if it works for you as well. And the outcome of this is a lot of different themes and a lot of different problems to solve. And not all of those are going to be for you as a design ops team. A lot of them are going to be for folks on your leadership team or, design leads that really want a moment to shine and really flex their muscles. So it's going to be really important as you're articulating this to your leadership team to really highlight the things that are on the ops bucket and the things that are going to be on design leadership or the design teams bucket. And sometimes, your entire product team, because we want to expand and think in terms of teams, not just design team. And so one of my favorite tools to use is really looking at the menu. So articulating beyond your charter, what are some of the menu items and the options that your team can actually tackle? There's so many different variations of this out there. So I'll link to a couple of my favorites. This is one by Adam Fry Pierce, and basically this menu ends up breaking down some of those findings and the things that you will tackle as a design ops team into organizational and then practice things. So I highly suggest really articulating that with your leadership team. So you would use this menu, they would highlight areas that they want to tackle for the year, maybe for the quarter, but that still leaves you potentially with a lot of things. Like, great, this is a lovely menu, I want all the things, but we still need to find focus. And so from here, we get into planning. And so I love this tool. I've borrowed it from our product management folks. It's an outcomes-based roadmap. It's a really great tool to be able to really focus on the outcomes of your efforts and also really try to shy away from dates so that you can see all the components here. You see the goals and objectives are clearly articulated in this roadmap. I'll send some examples of it so you can look at what it looks like in reality. But you would have your top line goals, maybe you have your OKRs. That's a great way to start with. And then that kind of centers everything around these goals. Then you prioritize these themes into these time horizons. And these time horizons are really helpful to stay away from arbitrary deadlines. Sure, you're going to have dates, but sometimes it's okay to have that flexibility so you can, really experiment with some of the solutions that you are trying to pilot with different teams. And then each of those themes we'll have the success measures. So really understanding the problem is going to be helpful for you to articulate what that benchmark is. And that can easily at times tie to your KRs, your key results, or, if you're not using your KRs, you can have just metrics that are attached to that. And that way you can see and articulate not only what your focus is, but also how you can be successful once you've achieved that. And, this all sounds perfect and great. I hope it does, but there's still going to be a ton of things that come at you. And if you are a yes person like me, you like to please your team, there's going to be bound like things to come on your plate that are not on this roadmap. And so using that roadmap, you need to say no. And you need to say, just because it's not on the roadmap, we can't do this right now. And so one of the handy tips that I like to do is have a parking lot section in my roadmap and put those in my parking lot. And my parking lot is a place where I can then refer to with my leadership team and my team to have those trade-off conversations and really see how we might reprioritize as things come up. And that's totally fine because there's no perfect plan, and nor should there be. The only constant in life is change. So, but at least it gives you the visibility to be able to have those trade-off conversations. And then, there's different hacks you can have. You could, sometimes you could put a bucket for keeping the lights on activities that it can account for a percentage of your time that is going to be bound to spending on unexpected things or those tactical things that just are bound to come up. So depending on the size of your team, that could be anywhere from 5 to 20%. So really take this and make it yours. So now we have our roadmap, and we're ready to start with solving some of those problems. As I mentioned before, I am a designer, and I used to spend a lot of years as a consultant in lean and agile methodologies and user-centered design. So one of my favorite frameworks, or the only framework I really use, is the build, measure, learn. This came from the days that I spent at Pivotal Labs, and we had Eric Rees as our field entrepreneur. And so this was really hammered into my DNA. And I really like to think about this as, the learning. So I emphasize the learning phase, really thinking about learning and then building and measuring. This is not dissimilar to like a lot of the different design thinking frameworks. They're all very much similar, except we're able to use them to build operational systems and help create more efficient and happier teams. So what does that look like in practice? I want to give you an example that I did with in my previous consulting engagement. And I picked this one because according to the State of DesignOps report, one of the most common areas that we're asked to tackle is optimizing the design process. And so I liked this one because it really highlighted both like efficacy and efficiency together. And so, this engagement that I was on, we were asked to really help design and fit into the product team. The product team had become agile, at a recent time, and design wasn't really fitting in, and there was a lot of challenges happening within the organization. So like I said before, we started with a 2-week listening tour to really better understand the entire ecosystem. And we really focused on the end-to-end product development flow. And a lot of that time was spent trying to understand the mindset and the behavior of the team. So what are some of their current habits, their rituals, their perceptions? We framed a lot of the questions based on the DMA, or at least trying to have those buckets in mind. And then we also looked at the methods and the practices that the team were using or not using. And we were looking for opportunities to really bring in more outcomes-based thinking and user-centered design. And so all of that really helped us to focus on the top problems to highlight. And so you can see here, everything is laid over in our digital board lots of stickies, and a lot of things ended up surfacing in the area of key partnerships, as well as other areas. But the key partnerships was really the central part of this problem. We found that the designers were spending over 50% of their time in meetings. That was a lot of hours, which was almost 4 hours or more a day in their meetings. And so that was a lot. The delivery times were really, really long, and a lot of rework happened in the final stages. And I don't mean rework because of feedback from user interviews. This was rework because of, the development team hadn't seen designs, so it wasn't technically feasible. So there were a lot of rework had to happen. And so there was a lot of waste that was introduced into the product lifecycle. And then also there was a lot of cross-functional partners, like teaming problems. And design was a bit of an opaque box for the entire team. Nobody knew what design was doing or what stage something was at. And then designers similarly felt, they needed to protect their craft and their time because the requirements that came to them were either too rigid, so they felt like they had no flexibility, or they thought that it was too vague and the problem scope was too large. And then because they had been so burnt in the past by bringing designs to development and having to rework them, they just thought developers just said no, which is really not the case at all. And so, we started to really see that there was a systemic problem. And things even got more complicated because this team was geographically distributed across different time zones. So the silos that already existed were even bigger. And there was really no opportunity naturally to sync. And that created a lot of waste and frustration into the product development lifecycle. And so we found the root cause of everything. And that was really a lack of alignment and a shared understanding. And so when we came to this, we started to really think about how might we create more alignment and shared understanding while you are dealing with a geographically distributed team. So we really landed on this mental model of creating these intentional moments of inclusion and collaboration, co-creation. Because, as a distributed team, it was not possible for everyone to be together all day, every day, swiveling their chair around, having conversations, nor should they have to spend all that time together. We needed to really find those intentional touch points where alignment and shared understanding can take place. So that really helped us guide our thinking and our solutions. And so we ended up defining these. So it started with thinking about what are those critical touch points along the product development lifecycle. And then for each of those touch points or meetings, we were defining really clear outcomes and explicitly calling out who should be there and what their roles and responsibilities would be. And so that kind of demystified and made it more comfortable for everyone who's just building this new muscle and flexing this new way of being. And then we also wanted to avoid many hours on Zoom. So we identified asynchronous opportunities to maximize the team's time together. So not everything had to be done together. Some of the things could be done offline, and then online you could review. As well, we looked at some of the practices that didn't exist and introduced some new practices. For example, instead of coming with requirements, we started to really highlight problem statements. What problems are we trying to solve? Identifying the impact and the outcome that we're trying to achieve as a business. Identifying our assumptions, and lastly, figuring out the norms for the team. How are we going to come together? How often are we going to come together? How do we interact? And those things, while it seems pretty simple to most of us, some teams do struggle with it. I would say most teams, because we don't have these behaviors built in. And then another thing that we had to consider was really how to sell this value prop to these new disciplines that are not used to working in this way. A lot of these folks hadn't been part of a workshop and, already had their own perception and biases. So we had to penetrate these biases. So a lot of our time was spent thinking about how are we going to frame our value proposition of working in this new way, in this new process, to product managers or to engineers? And funny enough, it was really simple. It was like, hey, do you want to spend less time in meetings and deliver faster? And that sounds so simplistic, but that was literally one of the ways that we were able to get product management really excited. And then on the logistical, tactical side, it was tools and technologies. So the team didn't have a shared project management tool. The engineering team were in Jira, so we got design in Jira. We also moved the design team to work in more predictable sprints and really thinking about like how they're delivering their stories and working through those. And as well, we introduced a new whiteboarding tool because the team didn't have one, and we wanted to be able to have a way to mimic in life collaboration and co-creation. And so we did that, and obviously that was heavily facilitated. We really paired with the design team to help them understand how to move from becoming a design practitioner to a design facilitator, how they could bring everyone in their product team along the design journey. And that took some coaching and working really closely with them and creating facilitation guides, but that ended up working really well for the team in the long run. And the final solution was this. We ended up with these specific touch points. So, starting with the kickoff, where everyone is understanding the problem we're solving and the outcomes we're achieving and some of those assumptions. We introduced cross-functional stand-ups. Again, this is probably something your teams do, but if you don't do it, such a simple thing can make such a big impact. We also introduced Design Studio, which is another term for ideation session. This term comes from Lean UX. It's a really good way to bring in the cross-functional perspectives, and we were able to cut down on that design delivery time because we were able to get that feasibility and viability input earlier. And then similarly, design started to attend some of the other rituals for engineering. So we ended up attending grooming sessions where designers can answer questions. And as well, we instituted this thing called Dev Design Pairing, which was, a really informal pairing session where an hour a week, a designer would spend time with the developer. They can see things in pre-prod and be able to fix things, ask questions, basically also bond and, raise their technical IQ, as well as the engineering team is raising their design IQ. So it really helped the team bond in that way too. And then creating moments for feedback. And so retros were introduced. The team wasn't used to doing cross-functional retros. So we did some cross-functional retrospectives. And this really helped the team to be able to reflect on how they're working and have an avenue to share those feelings, which can actually, bubble up and explode if you're keeping them on the surface. It created a safe space for us to be able to discuss. And, again, as I mentioned, these are not new ideas. These are all amazing ideas that have been introduced by a lot of great thinkers in this field. One of my favorite ones, Jeff Gothel from Lean UX, as well as so many other folks. So, I'll highlight those and I'll share those at the end of this talk. So yeah, being a fan of starting really small, as you're tackling doing things for your teams as design ops, it is not uncommon for everyone to want you to scale immediately and go really fast and change processes across all the teams all at once. I'm personally not a fan of this. I'd like to see how the team does, have small experiments, work out the kinks, iterate, and then come up with a scale plan. So that's what we did. We started to experiment with one team, and we spent 6 weeks, 3 sprints with this team, and we got the feedback and made those small tweaks. And these were our results. So there was a lot of time that the team saved. We had approximately 6 hours now that were spent potentially at maker time, or focusing on things that can make their craft better. As well, there was significant reduction in the late stage redesign, which was really incredible because now we were able to deliver faster. There was not a lot of that confusion at the end where we had to go do rework, again, not from user research. And then there was also amazing happy teams. The team was more engaged. There was an increase in the eNPS score. And this narrative really landed well with the executive team at the time. And soon after, different product leaders were coming to design because they had heard of working in this new way. And so we started to naturally scale this out to other teams. So that was an example that I shared, and I reference a lot of different books and resources. Again, I'm going to link these all here for UXPin to share with you. So, I really recommend this. My life has become a lot easier because I come from design, so I can, leverage these. But as a design ops person, if you could check these out and make them yours, it would be amazing. And you can borrow so many goodies from here. The first one you can see is Liftoff. It's a great book. It's a book for managers, but there's a lot of amazing things for ops in here. So I highly recommend picking up this book. Lean UX, like I mentioned, Outcomes Over Outputs, which is a great book, really focuses on the value that we bring, by Josh Seiden. And then to the right, you see The New Design Frontier. So check it out and let me know what you all think. And as well, I want to plug this amazing community, the DesignOps Assembly. So, doing this stuff alone is really, really difficult. We're fortunate to have this amazing community at UXPin throwing events like this, but as well, we have the DesignOps Assembly. So please join this if you're not a part of this. There's so many amazing programs and so many new friends to meet, lots of practitioners and emerging leaders. And so if you can go to designopsassembly.com, you can join that team. And last but not least, I want to give another shout out to SiriusXM Pandora. We are hiring. So if you want to join our team and share your love for music, hit me up on LinkedIn and I'd be happy to have a conversation with you. All right. So I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was really great. There's been a lot of great feedback in the chat, and also we have a ton of questions, but again, unfortunately, we have just a short amount of time left to ask these of you. So I do encourage y'all, both for Maggie and Salomé, they are in the DesignOps Assembly Slack community, so you can ask your questions there if you miss out on those questions here. The one big question, I think, is really how do you present your recommendations from your learning tour or your listening tour to the decision makers and convince them to tackle these problems?
That's a really good question. So I think it comes down again to the design maturity assessment. So, the decision makers ideally have clear goals in mind. And so if you have certain OKRs and certain KRs that you're trying to achieve for that year, you can easily tie it to specific measures within the design ops maturity, design maturity model. So there are different 9 dimensions. And so if there are things that you're trying to improve in research or design attrition or partners working better or end-to-end workflow, all of those plug in really nicely in there. So you can have that conversation. You can dig deep into the report and start to make those connections between what that business goal is and what the potential themes that you could tackle would be able to provide.
Awesome. One last question. In your opinion, what would be the top OKR for teams just kind of starting off with design ops to focus on?
I think that's so contextual to the team and where they're at. So I don't think there would be a top OKR to rule them all. I feel like, you really have to understand what your organization, where it's at, what it needs. Some teams are highly mature. and they're at a different part of their journey, and some teams are just starting. So I think it's going to be really contextual, and OKRs or any kind of goal setting is hard, but it's going to really depend on the organization. But I'm happy to spend time with whoever asked that question and dig into what they do. So if you want to hit me up on Slack or LinkedIn, I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Perfect. We know you have to go. Thank you so much for your time today and all the great insight.